All right, on this podcast, we go all the way to Manhattan, New York. Allison Chiaramonte, she runs a team with Compass. It's another contact through the Realm Network. She deals in the luxury anywhere from $1 million to $30 million. She's from the area. She's been doing business there for over 8 years. Let's take a listen. How's it going, Alice?
It's good. It's been a very busy few weeks here. It was very cold last week, but the market sort of kicked on despite the weather. And then this weekend was beautiful. So I feel like we're officially like in spring market 2 weeks, maybe earlier than normal.
Is that normal? Is that the spring market is sometime in March coinciding with Easter?
Yeah, I think that people would say like officially it's April, but I feel like it creeps early or every year. And so I tell most people like, let's try to be on the market by mid-March if we're going for spring.
When we first talked, maybe over a month ago, you were talking about the market and how it had shifted last year, but that you saw signs of changes at the beginning of this year. Are you still seeing that?
We are definitely seeing a pickup in the market just purely from a listing request, like showings have gone through the roof. Things that have been on for a while that were sitting dead with maybe one showing or two showing requests a week, all of a sudden we're up to 3 or 4, and things that are new, there's definitely an excitement about. And then I'm just noticing with my buyers that certain properties that needed a lot of work that were sitting now have offers on them, and some things that have come on new for spring are moving very quickly.
Okay. And your listings, typically the price ranges that you're dealing with?
So I have a really wide range where I deal with everything from sort of $1 million 1-bedroom or studio up to, I'd say, 30 or $40 million penthouses. My sweet spot is really, I would call it the 3 to 5 million, but I do have a fair number of 7 and 8s too.
And Allison, you're actually from the area.
Yes, I am one of those weird people. I was born 12 blocks from where I'm sitting now. I live 3 blocks. I basically lived in like a 30-block bubble for a very, very long time on the Upper East Side.
And how has that helped you in your real estate career, being that you're from there, you live there, and you do business there?
Ironically, I think it's given me a lot of perspective in the sense that I sort of remember certain areas from growing up and how they've changed. And I remember a time when people never wanted to live sort of east of 3rd or Lex, and now we have like luxury skyscrapers going up that people are paying, over $3,000 a foot for on 2nd and 1st. So it's been interesting to sort of see the micro neighborhood of like the Upper East Side expand and where people want to live there. And then also all of Manhattan, where areas of Harlem and Upper Manhattan that would have been areas that a more luxury buyer was not interested in before, people are investing in, they're moving there, they're buying pied-à-terres there. So it's been very sort of fun for me to see that. And, especially sort of during the COVID era when people thought the city was getting dangerous or things were changing, sort of the perspective of having grown up here in the 80s and being like, no, like this is nothing. Like we used to not be able to walk in Central Park. Like it just sort of gives me confidence in, investing in the Upper East Side and sort of guiding my clients about which areas will always have a value to people.
What happened in the real estate market during the early stages of COVID? So when the lockdown and maybe the next 1 to 2 years after, what was the real estate market like?
So, we weren't allowed to show or do anything. So what happened is everyone was stuck at home. We couldn't actively show anything for a period of time. And people who were in contract but not closed began to freak out. We saw some people walk away from their 10% deposits. Mm-hmm. We saw a lot of buyers trying to renegotiate contracts that were already in process and get better deals. And then eventually we started to see people wanting to look and realizing that it was a unique moment and a unique opportunity for them to buy. But we're not a market that really was used to or comfortable with showing via video, having people buy sight unseen, especially a large portion of my business and just frankly, a large part of the New York inventory is co-ops. And so with that process, it's very personal. So both the buyer and seller are often not comfortable doing that where no one's actually met face to face. Because how do you know how someone's going to act in a board interview if your agent's never even met them except through a camera?
So what percentage of your deals during that time were like that versus a traditional way?
I mean, it was really a handful. Like I can count them on one hand. I do know that there's certain brokers who work more with condos or work more downtown where that was a larger portion of their business. So it did exist, but it was still a small amount.
Okay.
Did you guys see a change like that or not really?
Yeah, luckily for us, because we're a second home market. Are you in a second home market or is it primary residence?
I would say that New York is both for people. So Manhattan, we work with a lot of people. This is their family home where they're spending all their time. But a lot of our clients are also looking at it as a second home. They either have moved elsewhere for their primary residence and are using it as a pied-à-terre, or they're downsizing from somewhere else, or they have multiple homes. So a little bit of both.
Yeah, so the majority of our clients are second homes. And so we typically are dealing with our clients pre-COVID in a virtual manner. And so that helped us a lot in terms of the buying and selling process because we just did a lot more of it during that time. And it also, living on a beach, it's actually was one of those places that people wanted to escape to. So our business exploded just like most everyone else's real estate business exploded during that time. And and we have a lot of lasting effects from that. So I see whether you're an individual real estate agent or buyers and sellers, they tend to gravitate towards more that virtual kind of look and feel. And there's good and bad with that. Now that I consider us, in a normal market and dealing with the normal things. And if we rely too much on the technology, we're taking, I think, a big part of the advantage that we have being real estate professionals, especially when we're competing with the big tech companies and online websites and trying to commoditize our business, right? And so the relationship is never going to be the same virtually compared to in person.
For sure.
You talked about co-ops. What are co-ops for those that don't know?
So for those that don't know, in New York, about 2/3 of our, sales building inventory is what are called cooperatives. And instead of buying real property, you're buying essentially shares in a corporation. And you have a certain number of shares that is very loosely allocated to sort of how much of the building your particular unit is. And what's unique about a co-op is there is a co-op board that runs the building that holds a lot of power. So they set rules about financing. They set rules about whether you can rent the unit out. They control sort of the alteration and construction process in the building. They manage the building's budget. And they are in charge of sort of vetting new potential buyers. And so when you buy in a co-op, you have to disclose a lot of financials. You often need personal recommendation letters. And you often are asked to be interviewed by the board before them letting you in. And they have the right to reject you for sort of any reason. Like they don't need to disclose why. So there's a whole nother piece in sort of vetting potential buyers of any property that us as selling agents are responsible for, because you could have two people bidding the same price or one person bidding more. But if one person is not going to make it through the co-op board, which is always a little bit of a judgment call, it's not a valid offer. It's not a useful offer. It just ties up the apartment. That's very different than what we have here is also condominiums, where you're buying real property. You have your own tax lot with New York City, and generally the rules around financing, et cetera, are much looser.
Can you finance a co-op?
You can, but it varies. So some co-ops allow 0% financing, some allow 20. The majority allow, I would say, 50 to 60 or 75, but especially on the Upper East Side, 50 is very normal to see.
Okay. And you said that the majority of your inventory are co-ops.
Yes, at least in Manhattan, there are more co-ops than condos.
Would it be, so that seems to make it more difficult to sell.
Yes, it makes it more difficult to sell and more difficult to buy, because one of the things that a lot of co-op boards look at from a purchaser is, let's pretend you have an apartment that's $2 million. They don't want to just see $2 million in a bank account. They are looking generally to see a certain amount of liquidity after your purchase and a certain debt to income ratio.
Wow. And it's more strict, it sounds, than what a bank would have.
Yes. A lot of times what we'll see is that a lender is willing to lend a certain individual 70%, but a co-op will only allow them to finance 50. This worked to a lot of co-ops' advantages during sort of like the mortgage crises because people weren't as extremely levered. But at the same time, co-ops traded a discount to condos, and it used to be a very wide discount because when rates were really low, people wanted to borrow the money. And there's sort of a variance there where you can't compare an apartment in a condo to the exact same apartment in a co-op. The condo will be, 20% more expensive on average.
Have you seen the co-ops going to a condominium, like transitioning?
So people talk about all the time, and there are apparently a lot of tax implications for the building from going from the cooperative form of ownership to condos. So people tend not to. What we are seeing is more and more co-ops becoming more flexible with their rules in a way to sort of emulate a condo, in the sense that they are allowing subletting, they are allowing more financing. There are a few advantages to co-ops too, from a financial perspective. There's no mortgage recording tax because you're not buying real property, which is a real savings to a potential buyer. But we are seeing certain co-ops sort of becoming more flexible, but then also in light of sort of financial markets, sometimes we see the opposite happening where co-ops are getting more nervous and sort of clamping down on requirements.
Is there like a board, just like in a condo regime?
Yes, exactly. But unlike in a condo where the board can basically, if they don't want to grant a waiver, they have to buy the apartment themselves. In a condo, in a co-op, they don't need to do that.
Okay. Your preference?
I mean, working with buyers, it's certainly easier to deal with a condo, and it's certainly easier to sell a condo because there's a much broader pool of potential candidates. But I think as an agent, you add a lot of value if you understand the co-op process and can appropriately vet people and lead potential buyers through that process. There's a lot of prep work. The packages that go into these co-ops are thick.
And each co-op is going to be different. It's going to behave differently.
Yes.
And a lot of politics.
There's certain similarities between them, but each one has its own rules, regulations, how many recommendation letters they want, what type of liquidity they're expecting to see, et cetera.
Okay. And so you're just buying shares. You're not actually buying the real property.
Yes.
So what happens how do they calculate like capital gains taxes or, like write-offs and things like that? It's a different.
So at the sort of corporation level, you'll get a letter from your board every year that talks about, what percent of your maintenance, and your maintenance really does include sort of like what we would call in your market, probably like a homeowners association or common charges, and the taxes rolled into one number.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And are you seeing co-ops being like new buildings going the co-op way, or are they just going straight condo?
Most new buildings are going straight to condo because that's definitely the trend and the buyer preference if you're building ground up or doing a conversion. Sure. You do see sometimes newer buildings being cooperatives when they don't own the land underneath it, but that's like a land lease, and that's like a whole other situation.
Right. Okay. So you got into the business how many years ago, Allison?
I got into the business right after my first son was born, so about 8 years ago.
8 years ago. And how did you get into the business? I mean, you're from the area, but how do you get into the business? What were you doing before?
So I got into the business in sort of a roundabout way. I grew up in a family that owned rental buildings around Manhattan. So I sort of grew up in a family where I was exposed to real estate. My dad was a real estate lawyer. My mom sort of managed this rental portfolio. And right after college, I actually went to work in commercial real estate for a company called CB Richard Ellis, big commercial firm in their investment properties group. So doing large building sales. So basically big office buildings around Manhattan, which I found very boring at the time. Like learning about, sort of commercial grade boilers and, office space at the time. I was young and probably should have been more interested than I was, but I didn't think it was that fun. And I at the time said, oh, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go back to business school. And I ended up in fashion for quite a while doing buying for women's clothing. But I always sort of was interested in real estate. And I got into this unique niche in buying where I dealt with a lot of luxury brands who essentially lease spaces from the big US department stores. And so even though I wasn't in real estate anymore, there was sort of this rental per square foot, like space aspect. And when I left my last job, which was buying women's designer clothing for a big department store, I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I got approached for this odd consulting job where it was kind of, they needed someone with a brokerage license, which I had, who had experience with concessions, but also sort of leasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, I could do that. And it was at that point that my agent, because I had just bought an apartment myself, who was a friend of mine, the mother of a friend of mine, was like, why would you do something for like 6 months or a year? Like you could be an agent until, you're much older and you'd be good at this. You grew up here. You knew a lot of the buildings. I really enjoyed that process. And so I took her up on an offer to sort of test it out and joined her team a few months later, worked with her and her team for 2 years, and then went off on my own.
And right now you run your own team.
Yes. Right now I run a team of 6 people with a business partner.
And what does your business look like today?
So today our business we are a very successful, we still call ourselves a small team just by sort of how the real deal, if you're under 10 people or 8 people, I think you're considered a small team. So we're one of the top small teams in Manhattan. We sort of like being small. A lot of our business is still personal or referral based. We don't do a lot of cold marketing. So it's all friends of friends and clients recommending us to other clients or buildings that we've just done enough business in that we sort of have a nice flow of business from them. It's me and my business partner, and we do the large majority of the business. And underneath us are 3 to 4 sort of more junior agents working on a combination of our business, but also their own businesses. And then we have sort of a right hand who handles, all our business with us, predominantly focused a little bit more on our lower price points. Okay. And then we're on the hunt for an admin and a director of ops. So we're growing, but that's sort of the structure right now.
Okay. And you're with Compass, correct?
Yes, I'm with Compass.
And
I've been at Brown Harris Stevens. That's where I started my career. And then I was at a small boutique firm called Warburg, which recently, about 2 years ago, when I joined Compass, became part of the Coldwell Banker family.
Okay. So you've been with Compass for how long then?
Almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years. And what is the presence of the Compass brand in Manhattan?
So Compass is sort of the newcomer, but also one of the largest brands. So it's funny, depending on our clients, people are either hyper aware of it, very excited, think it's amazing that we've grown so fast, or we have some clients who literally are like, what is that company? Even though it has the largest number of agents in Manhattan and the New York area and is, one of the big firms these days.
I see you on social media. You're very active. What has that been always since you started in real estate, being on social media, or is that something you had to evolve?
I'm glad you think that we're very active. I think we could be more active. It has evolved over the last few years to be a bigger presence, because our business is so personal still.
Mm.
You know, a lot of people invest in mailers or mailings or newsletters, and we were finding that the best new clients were coming from our Instagram and social, and that they were people who were following us because they personally perhaps sort of knew us, or were a friend of a friend, or we, went to the same gym, or some sort of connection. We're on a charity board together. They start following you, and then they realized what we were doing and were reaching out about listings that we had off market, et cetera. And after we sort of had that aha moment where some of our best new clients were actually people we met through social, we didn't, they weren't like random people, but that was the connection. We have been trying to focus more on it, but it's hard to make content.
Well, it is. I mean, the content, you have to have almost a full-time or at least a part-time person just dedicated to doing that.
Yeah. How do you guys do it?
We have our own media content department. So that's where, I started individual agent, probably just like you start building a couple agents, and then you realize, okay, do I stay at this size and scale, or do I go bigger? But to go bigger, you can't be caught in the middle. If you get caught in the middle, you can't justify certain expenses or a lot of expenses because you're not big enough. So yeah, we had to get really big in order to justify. I think we have like 4 people that's all they do.
Oh, wow. It's like a whole.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And even I can say having 4 full-time people, it's still not enough, because you always find more things for them to do or things that you aspire to do. And it's like, oh, geez, can I justify hiring another person? And so it's a never-ending game. It really is.
It really is an interesting like conundrum of like how many, and like you can keep it getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
But one of the things for me in my business, and it sounds like you do a really good job because the majority of your business is coming from repeat business and referrals. How do you nurture those relationships to have the majority of your business coming from those lead sources?
So we do not have as strategic an approach as we should. And I feel like that's been something that, I've only dabbled with real estate coaches, but that everyone tells us is like, we need to be more thoughtful and strategic as the business has grown and the sort of volume of deals have grown, that we need to find a better way to make sure we're staying in touch with those people. I've sort of done it organically in the sense that I enjoy, helping people. I get to know them, we become friends, and then I follow up naturally because I'm actually curious how their renovation is going, or I'm like, oh, did they have that baby? But I find that by sort of just trying to be present in my life and very open to, giving people advice and sort of unsolicited opinions and helping here and there with people who aren't even clients, that's been the best way to kind of stay front of mind. But I also think social is a very good way to sort of do that without actually personally interfacing. And we're trying to do, now that we're kind of coming out, more in-person events as a team and as a brand, so to speak. But I love like being with people. That's what I think I was missing with commercial for me, was that I missed the one-on-one connection. So that's my favorite part of the business, I think.
I think it's for the majority of the real estate agents, in our profession, is they just love dealing with people. They don't like to deal with the admin. They don't want to deal with systems. They don't want to deal with SOPs. They are like, what? Like, I know I run away from it, but it's essential to a business. So that's where I just hire the people. And so it's like, you have to bite the bullet.
Exactly. I like in theory love like systems and strategies. And I feel like I'm a little bit of a nerd like that. Like in business school, I loved like operations and all those organizational things, but there's only so much time in the day. And I agree, it's probably not the best use of my time.
No, and you've obviously built a good business for you and the team of 6 or so people. And it's just a matter of you want to get bigger at that point.
And as you said, there's like a tipping point of that.
Yeah, and it's like time, it's money, it's stress and if it's all worth it.
Exactly.
It's definitely a lot of
The
stress.
nice thing about New York, which might be different than a second market, is we somewhat grow with our clients organically, in the sense that I've helped people buy their first home or their second home, and then they upgrade. And I've been lucky enough to sort of follow along that journey with them.
Allison, was it in our prior conversation, or maybe mistaking it, that you had a client that you sold a property, or you were a part of a property that you knew the parents or something like that? I mean, has that happened yet, where
Yes.
you're dealing with multiple generations?
Well, it started happening that I've started helping, more contemporaries of mine buy and sell, and then they will have either their parents looking to downsize or move closer because they want to be near them, where I've started helping parents buy and sell as well. And I have multiple examples of where I've helped at least two generations. I'm trying to think if I've done any 3 generations. Maybe not 3, but I've definitely done 3 branches where it's been a mom and 2 or 3 sisters within the same family, or cousins.
Cool. Well, Allison, I appreciate you connecting in your busy time there in Manhattan. The real estate market's picking up a little bit sooner than you anticipated, which is a good thing.
Yes, we'll take it when it comes.
Well, Easter, maybe it's because Easter, I think, is a little bit earlier this year than typically. I think isn't it in March, or is it?
I think so. I mean, I know that the private school breaks are all off here this year. They're a little different than they normally were.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. And I think that we've been really inventory starved, and inventory has started picking up. And I think people are hopeful. So that's always a good thing.
March 31st is Easter.
That is early, right? That's
so
early.
It's early. Yeah, my kids are out of on spring break starting the 23rd or 22nd of March. So
it's the 15th here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you guys get 2 weeks because it's private?
We get 2 weeks for private.
We do too. So, well, Allison, thank you. I look to staying connected, and if you need any help in regards to scaling your business, I'm here. Online
thank you. I really appreciate that offer.
Online lead nurture, because it sounds like if you just have the conversation, you get the people into your sphere, then your existing business will take care of the rest, and just exposing yourself to more opportunities.
Right. And I hope to contact you one day for my vacation home. So
you have been to Cabo or in the Baja before?
So I have not. My brother and my husband my brother lives in LA, and his family, they love Cabo. And that side of the family goes to Cabo all the time. And my husband is from LA and always tells me we could do more the other side of Mexico, but how much better Cabo is. So maybe one day.
Okay. Well, if your husband and you ever want to come here, let us know. We have plenty of accommodation or recommendations for accommodation. So love to host.
Wonderful.
All right, Allison.
Thank you. It was so nice seeing you again.
Likewise. And until the next one, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nick Fong Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ronaval Real Estate, and follow Nick on Instagram at NickFong_Ronaval. Ready to find your Baja dream home? Check out the latest property listings at ronaval.com or findmexicohouses.com. Hasta luego.